Luke, I have a question for you. So our dam is rated in fair condition. Before we did the repairs, it was in poor condition. What are the different conditions?
Sure. So the condition assessment ratings were developed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and by the FEMA National Dam Safety Review Board as satisfactory, fair, poor, and unsatisfactory. So poor means it can mean two things. It can mean a deficiency is recognized that could put the dam at risk, or additional analysis is needed to make a comprehensive condition assessment. So, if we identify an issue and we say, well, we've got to go do some geotech work to see what the stability of this embankment is.
That's if it's in a poor condition.
That would be a poor. So satisfactory basically means that the dam's in great shape. There's nothing, even during an extreme event, that would be majorly concerned about. That's the dams that are just pristine, maybe just some minor maintenance issues that still allow it to be satisfactory. Then you drop down into fair, which is where we are, which is no major deficiencies that would expect failure, even during a pretty good storm event, but a very rare extreme storm event or a loading condition, or earthquake or something like that could cause an issue. And then maybe there's some more maintenance things that need to be done or should be done or considered. So that's when the fair poor is that deficiency recognized or additional analysis is needed. And then the unsatisfactory is basically there's a deficiency that's so bad or more deficiencies that we have to take action like right away, or the dam could fail realistically, soon.
So MDEQ defines long-term stability as 25 years. So that's what I read. And we want to look at all options, right? I mean, we want to do an economical option as well, right? I don't think anybody's looking for, that Cadillac.
I told him, yeah. He asked me, called me several times about
We're going to
this.
get us from point A to B and be structural sound.
But he said he wanted to make sure it was set up right,
So,
done correctly.
what would we have to do in order to look at, instead of replacing this dam, just bringing it up to MDEQ standards? What would we have to do in regards to this?
So rehabilitation of the existing structure, the first step would be to do that comprehensive evaluation by an engineering firm. And then from that there'd be recommendations. And so then, and Jason could probably talk more about this, but when you're talking about at some point when there's section loss and exposed rebar, it costs more to patch the wall than just to replace it. So at that point, you would have to get that detailed structural evaluation of the structure and say, is it even feasible that you do rehabilitation, or would it be a full reconstruction? And then when you're talking reconstruction, you might as well fix some of don't use the 1913 engineering standards, use the 2020 engineering standards where they have gates that are more easy to operate, or it's a fixed press situation, something like that. So I think that would be the first step, would be that detailed engineering evaluation to look at feasibility of rehabilitation versus reconstruction or replacement. And I think so. I can't tell you, if you just do patching, that's the lifetime of a patch is a lot less than the lifetime of a new reconstructed structure. So you have to look at the cost versus benefit and even just the feasibility. If this structure is beyond the point where rehabilitation makes economical sense, then you might eliminate that just from why would you rehabilitate something when you can make something better with new, and have a 50-year life cycle versus a 10 to 25 on a repair.
One of the big concerns we had on this particular structure is the embankments.
Sure.
And I mentioned the 2007 seepage that was on this embankment over here. And Matt, you probably can remember, but the water started to seep out behind the concrete.
Fell down.
Oh, you.
Oh, yeah, I know. I've seen that.
The earlier work that was done shows there's all kinds of fill material on both sides, including tree stumps and things like that. So besides the structure itself, the embankment that's really kind of holding things together. And with the new bridge and the repairs that we've done in between, you know, we're hopeful that we've guided that water and it's not finding its way behind like it was previous to that. But it's still a concern. So we got to keep in mind there's the structure, but then there's also the embankment that's really, you know, damming up the pond. And at all, we would suggest, you know, we look at it or is looked at when we do an analysis of the structure of part of the dam.
I would just echo that to say that so you really have two options, is, you know, look at the replacement, removal, repair options and make a selection and move towards that, or in very short order, we're probably going to require that detailed structural evaluation happen anyway. And it would include this, you know, the sections of the embankment here where we're concerned with this, you know, end dump concrete cap that's had issues over the years, stability of this embankment, and, you know, stability of the structure itself. So I think that, you know, that's where we're headed. You know, so either you do the fix, you don't do the analysis, or you do the analysis to ensure the timeline of the fix is, you know, correct type of thing. So, so rather than saying, you know, any type of rehabilitation, we're going to need to see that thorough analysis of stability and safety of the structure and what repairs need to be done to bring it to 2020 engineering standards. You know, like you said, it's stable now. You know, the immediate concerns have been addressed, but that long term, I wouldn't say 25 years is long term in this sense, because I think we were saying more like 10 years in 2012. You know, we extended that period out by the repairs that have done and addressing immediate concerns. You know, that 2012 was considering all the immediate and long term concerns. We said it's poor condition, we need to fix right now. Some of that stuff was done and then probably extended that out. But I would say we're looking at a 5 to 10 year like implementation with monitoring between and all the analyses and design that needs and funding that needs to happen to actually be able to implement the project. I mean, that's the time frame I'd be looking at. Unless there's a very detailed analysis, you know, that considers all these things we just talked about, that says you have longer. You know, we can't make that from a picture. We can identify deficiencies and put a time frame on it, but, you know, unless somebody comes out and says it does some, you know, structural analysis, technical analysis, you know, and this overall condition analysis, they would have then at that point they would have a better understanding of when. But I mean, just in my experience, you know, in Ypsilanti here and some of the other ones were kind of at the same. You got these retired hydro dams that haven't had a whole lot of structural maintenance since they retired, you know, since they retired in the 60s, 70s, even early 90s. You know, you're talking about a 5 to 10 year even after those analyses are done. That's generally the recommendation is, well, about 5 to 10 years, we need to be looking at major rehabilitation, replacement of structure. Then you're in a point where nobody's comfortable. You know, nobody's comfortable slapping band-aids on it and doing these risk reduction measures. You're talking about major problems. So I would say, without any better information, that's your time frame is 5 to 10 years.
What would a structural analysis cost?
I don't want to throw out a number. I'm sorry. And the reason is there's such a range. On the Hamilton Dam in the city of Flint, we brought in a geotechnical firm. They did a number of pours in the concrete. They took those back to the lab. They evaluated them. They took borings down below the foundation and the embankments. And so to come up with a true,
What is that?
about 10 years ago. I can go look and share that. It's probably that was probably on the order of $75,000 to $100,000.
And that's where I'm going with it, because if they come back and say, we need to do this, you know, within the next 5 years, anything we do is going to cost us another $100,000. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So if he's saying that, or if they're saying that, hey, within the next 5 years, if you don't do anything, you're going to need to spend $100,000 to get this dam, because we're going to mandate it, and you guys get this dam, you know, looked at, we have to be ready to spend $100,000. Or, we bump that back a year and say, we have 4 years to get this in place, and we'll save $100,000.
Right.
we already have some repair work, some investigation coming up soon to look at a Band-Aid for now. So we're kind of, if I can put this in order, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we have some repair work, some investigation and repair work scheduled for later this summer. And after that, we need to do some evaluation because we'll start putting money aside in next year's budget plan, start our planning process for a long scale. And personally, we need the Band-Aid. I think people need to understand that. We can't look the other way anymore. Here we have it. I think we've had council before they've been adopted. But Band-Aid it, analyze it, start putting money into it. And then we'll talk with the powers that be about time frame. I've been over to Chester. That was a lot of work. But they were able to maintain the height of the water upstream, not immediately in town, upstream. The water level didn't drop much. And downstream, the river was maintained as a river. It was not a dam. It's what's the correct term for it?
We call it a rock ramp.
Rock ramp.
It's still a regulated dam.
All right. Well, certainly we'll talk about that. We need to talk about every single option. And one of the reasons I've been told by previous council, if you don't look at every single option, somebody's going to come up at the last minute and say, no, here's a petition, you didn't look at X, Y, and Z. That's their way of stalling it or canceling it. You have to answer every question, good or bad, before you're halfway done. And I'm sorry, that might be not what you guys already know. This is the good stuff.
Yeah.
We're on the right track.
I think related to that, back in the feasibility study in 2013, there was, I think, varying thoughts from council members on what to do, because removal of the dam and turning the impoundment back to a natural river wasn't real popular with folks that might be living on the mill pond, right? And so if as you guys think more about whatever that option might end up being, certainly the local funding, there's ways to look at how to, come up with an assessment for the people that are benefiting from the mill pond to help with that. That's typical in a lot of these projects is assessing a cost based on benefit and value. And it's not popular with everyone, but it's something to keep in mind if the longer term option is, do you want the mill pond or do you want to naturalize the river? And there's advantages and disadvantages to both, right? So at the time, I know that was very contentious. And I think that's probably why it kind of just got put on the shelf, or one of the reasons.
May I ask you, when we started before, there was some communications, and I don't know, it was for your office, and it was suggestions on how to set up the committee and how to proceed, like you were just saying, investigate and do this. Part of that was having a committee from every section of town, all ages, and people would come and go because it's not an overnight committee. People don't want to stay with it. We're probably not going to end this with the same committee we started. Do you know if that's where would that be in writing? I'd like to show that to people.
I could look that up. I remember putting something like that together for you guys, back then.
I think it would be beneficial. You can hand it out at meetings and talk to people. You may have to solicit in the paper. work.
But you gotta limit the number of people.
Yeah, we have
You
to
don't want
decide
it to
that.
become the-
No, yeah, you're right.
They don't
And,
have a
I
park
think-
to go stand in.
I think that, well, we'll talk about how to get on a committee one. We'll talk about that in a meeting, but, I just think that, we need people from every part of town, because when we have to turn to the citizens to raise money, I don't want to say, well, only this section showed up is on the committee. And therefore, it's kind of like to have it in writing to show it. Not just me saying it, that it's agreeing with what was said before.
Yeah. I'll dig that up and send it to you.
Yes, please.
I think the last time I came down to a council meeting, we did speak about, I think what Jason was hinting at was the 307 legal lake level process, in which you can, the county can pass a resolution, or they can be petitioned to pass a resolution to start a lake level study and establish a legal lake level for the mill pond. And in doing so, they would have the ability to assess the lakefront properties and people who draw benefit from the maintenance of that lake level.
Yes.
So that, I think that was kind of one of the concerns that I had heard. A lot back then was, a lot of the folks who lived on the mill pond really wanted to keep the dam as is, mill pond elevations where they're at. Folks who lived off the mill pond who didn't have direct access rooms, why is that spread to the whole tax base when it should be, more commensurate with the folks who draw benefit from the mill pond?
Because that's where all this comes from. So they are benefiting from everything.
Sure. So that's not the way the lake level statute works. I'm saying those are.
But everybody in the community is benefiting from the pond. Whether or not you're in the house or not.
Sure. So I don't, you don't have to convince me. I'm just saying that, that was the big outcry, and I received probably 10 phone calls a day for several months about this, and emails, hundreds and hundreds of emails, and that's why at that point there was a big push from the citizenship to explore the option of removal. I believe there was, at that point people were looking at maybe pulling some sediment cores and doing some of the preliminary survey work to see what removal would look like and if there was contamination in the sediment. And I think that stalled out, like we talked about on the phone. So
Yeah, it's stalled out.
Yeah.
The sediment testing.
yeah. So that's what we ran into a few years ago.
Right.
And then I think everything stalled out with the lawsuit and the administration changeover. But so I'm saying is, like, from our expectation is we kind of have to pick up the ball and start running with it. We don't have because we lost all that time that the intent was to be planning and moving forward with selection. We basically took about 2 to 3 years, and didn't really do a whole lot of advances. So I think the state's expectation is that if it's a committee that gets formed to look at feasibility of the options, we're not going to tell you what options to look at. We just, from the dam safety standpoint, we don't have a dog in that fight, whether it's dam in versus dam out, what options get looked at, what options don't get looked at. I'm just saying, from my experience, I know there was a big outcry from the village when removal was not being looked at, and there was, so they'll have to contend.
I know, right?
So that's my point is, but we need to see some movement in that direction. Let's see some movement of looking at these alternatives, make some progression towards selecting an alternative, and make some progression towards planning for implementation of that alternative in the next few years, and then monitoring, in the meantime, regular inspections by your staff, follow-up inspections when anything changes, and then constant communication with us so that we know if the dam is deteriorating more rapidly than it has been, or if it's relatively holding stable. I think that's kind of the path forward, but you're right. Any alternative is going to need a lot of analysis, right? Because if you're talking about dam construction, that's a big price tag just for the design, because you've got a structure here with 16 feet of normal head. That's not, that's a fairly substantial structure to hold back that much pressure. You got a very wide road embankment here, plus this concrete spillway, and it's been relatively stable, and it's not just something that you replace, without a lot of engineering design and analysis. So rehabilitation takes a lot. It's a different set of analyses. It's assessment of the existing structure, and then some analysis of the existing structure to see what it would take to bring this one into modern engineering standards. Reconstruction is a different set of analysis. It's like, okay, how do we design a structure to do to that? And removal has a whole different slew of considerations that must happen. So So I think that's kind of
That's a lot of information.
Information
lot.
It's
overload.
like, whoa.
Yeah.
Did we already do that study, being that we have drawings, I'm sorry, not drawings, but did we
Map.
spend the money already to have,
He's asking a question.
We did a feasibility.
Yeah, the study that was done did some hydraulics to look at the flood impacts to determine how we could come up with some solutions. So like a couple of those that have the long weir out front here, that was based on the need to have to pass I think the 200-year flood event. So we did do some hydraulics just to kind of come up with those scenarios. We didn't do any structural inspections or any collecting field information on, the dam, the concrete, the embankment, that type of thing.
so with the drawings that are currently out there, there's a lot more work that needs to go into.
Yeah. So those I would call them conceptual drawings.
What's the word? They're visual conception. They were not just
And it was-
scale. They were not.
That's right. It was in an effort to try to get a magnitude of cost. Is it 500,000 or 5 million or somewhere in between? And so, those aren't costs that it would take. It's not bid, fully designed and bid, and all those things you need to get to the contractor giving you hard numbers. It's again a magnitude of cost, and we try to use historical numbers, and we look around the state and look at other projects and say, all right, we assign different values to come up with a cost, but it's a concept right now. So don't be married to those costs or those concepts. It's just here's the starting point. Yeah, and that's
It wasn't more so that it was, do we know that we can do them? I know we have a design that we designed and gave us some options to look at pricing,
yeah.
but can we use them if we wanted to use those? I mean, is it the banks okay to use or?
Well, so with those, the focus was trying to just leave the structure in place, pull out the gates, and then focus on that upstream with some type of weir. So, we did enough hydraulics to say, yeah, this is feasible. It can pass the flows, which will help us get through a permit process. That's what they're going to be looking for from a flood impact perspective. So, yes, the answer is, we did enough to say, yeah, this is doable.
Can be done. It's doable.
Yeah. So if any of those options or whatever options, then we'd have to basically pull that hydraulic model forward, refresh it, and when we submit for permits, we submit all that technical information to the state. And they review the hydraulics and review the proposed design, and we show hydraulics of what it is now and what it looks like when it's proposed. So that's some of the heavy lifting that still has to be done.
we'd be looking at geotechnical for geotechnical stability. So those are sheet options, or driven sheet
Yes.
options. We'd be looking at structural stability of the sheet and the loading. So there's more to the design that will have to be done. And I mean, it's more than just the hydraulic feasibility of something that could look similar to what's drawn on the paper. There's a lot of analyses and design that have to be done for any option, I think. So I mean, yeah, if you're at feasibility, level, you usually go through a 30%, 60%, 90% design with a lot of iterations of review, and so there's a lot of work still yet to be done. For any option that gets approved, whether it's repair, rehabilitation, or replacement or renewal.
Here's a good example for cost variables. So the sheet option, where we're going to have a contractor come in and drive sheet piling to construct that weir, we'd have to get a geotech firm out to actually drill down and see, and if they can't do it up the bridge, they'll have to bring a barge in, and then based on soil conditions, it could mean the sheet piling has to go this far or this far,
Oh, look who
and the
showed
cost
up.
of that is significant
smaller.
based on the difference, right? So, those are variables. It's hard to fully cost that out today. You gotta look at all those stuff.
Through your experience, what
This camera for me.
percentage of
Hold it for me.
total amount need to go in? At $1 million project, would you say 20% engineering?
Yeah, so typically when we're doing our like magnitude of cost, we'll add 25% in for engineering, and that includes the design and the permitting and also some oversight during construction. So, you know, we'll usually just put that in there, and so, and then also you'll see a contingency, just an extra 10 or 15%.
I guess where I'm going with it. And so if I took that, what you guys had drawn up, and said, okay, I'm going to put this out for bid. So I would have to add 25% more to that for the engineering and everything like that.
You would, but that was included in those numbers in the study.
Oh, was
if
it?
you look at the breakdown,
I
we
didn't
included
look
all
at
those.
it. I
Yeah.
did look at it.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. It's a good point because it's a significant chunk when you talk about your project cost. Yeah, for sure.
I'm thinking too, a single roll or roll of sheet with 16 feet ahead. Generally, it's cantilever sheet. Even like a heavy take that stowaway 12 cents so. So that would, if it were a single roll of sheet, would probably rely on this structure being maintained.
That was the assumption.
Keep that. So I mean, we'd have to. Right. In that case, we'd have to look at ongoing maintenance of this, because if this fails and that fails, this is now part of the dam. Right. So, and so I think that you talk cellular sheets or double roll, certain things you can use, or king piles or something like that. Keep that up. But, you get about 10 feet ahead on the cantilever sheet. Especially long term.
When you relieve the head pressure?
Lower the bottom.
Just by lowering the bottom?
That's the only way that the head can go is by having something.
So you couldn't put piling with sheet metal or rocks in this area right here to relieve the pressure off the dam.
So I think Jason was talking about removing gates to lower the head. I mean, if the water spills over one weir and then there's a forebay and then another weir, it's still the hydrostatic pressure is the same. But if you relieve the gates, it's less pressure. But what I was saying is, if there's 16 feet of head loss across the dam, that happens right now at the spillway. If you put a sheet up there and you lower this by 4 feet or whatever, 3 or 4 feet, that now you've got 4 feet of head loss there and another 12 here still. And my thought was, this is still functioning to hold everything in place up there. If this goes, then that goes well the whole time. But I was just thinking out loud that my experience, a single roll of sheet piling, designed for 16 feet of head loss. It's like an NRCS concrete energy dissipation spillway. It's probably not a single cantilever sheet. It's reinforced with cellular construction or king piles. It's not just a single roll of cantilever. Right. Cantilever is just like a sheet pile standing up. You've got soil and water here, and then nothing here. It's just driven down and fucking bending and all ends with erosion of the toes. It's fairly significant.
Is that what they did over at Atlas approximately?
What's that?
Is that what they did at Atlas? They built up the weir with the process you just described?
So the Atlas has a sheet pile and concrete drop inlet, and then but it's only maybe 3 feet, and then it outlets through a big CMP, like pipe arch, big like a 72-inch high corrugated metal culvert. So the head loss happens only a little bit at the weir, and then through a pretty steep culvert, and then there's a little bit of a punch hole. So
To maintain both levels.
what's that?
Both levels were maintained as previous, or close
It's
to.
probably pretty similar, maybe 12 to 15 feet ahead. I'm shooting from the hip, but yeah, that's what I say. Those, if you have a straight drop off a sheet, you know what I mean. That's a different type of spillway than a small drop into a culvert, into a, that head loss is spread out across multiple structures.
Would that be similar to what they did at Dexter?
Dexter was a dam removal.
Did they put the boulders downstream and soften them?
They dropped it through a series of great control structures. Yeah, so there was a concrete weir under the bridge, but it was only like 6-7 feet ahead, I think. And then they dropped that 6 or 7 feet through what are called cross veins. I think there are 4 of them there, and 2 of them are double throated, so it'd be a series of 6 drops that are a little bit less than a foot each. And they're spread out, hundreds of feet.
It didn't really look like an
not a dam anymore. That impoundment is completely gone.
But it accomplished what they wanted.
They removed the dam, yeah, and restored the bottom one. It's kind of like a park area now.
When we get together, I'll go over that one again, because technically that one, the dam was removed, but they maintained the levels previously.
And Dexter? No, Dexter was a full removal. That pond is completely gone there.
Yep.
Oh, the pond upstream?
Yeah, it's gone.
Down?
Yeah. Chesaning, they maintain more or less. I think they dropped it a little bit, but there's a few that have put in structures to maintain the pond level. It's an option to look at. I would say that you don't have as good access to removal money from a rock ramp because the big part of the dam removal funds is restoration of the stream, not just for fish passage but for function of the stream. And the thing that they don't like is that the temperature differential that happens in impounded water. When you put a water into a bathtub, it warms up to 80, 85 degrees, and it changes the ecology and the water quality a lot. So they're not, like Chesaning was not grant funded, it was an appropriation. I don't know of any other rock ramps that have, I would say Diamonddale, they put in a W weir that maintains some impoundment to protect bridge pilings upstream, but it did lower it quite a bit. They did get some grant money because that W weir does do sediment transport and eliminated most of the impoundment. What's that?
Where was that?
Diamonddale.
Diamond.
There was an old mill dam in Diamonddale that they replaced with a W weir, which is just like rocks stacked in a W, and they're kind of they're slanted so that there's a low flow channel, and then so there, I mean there's several partial dam removals, and Chesaning Franken dropped it by about 4 to 6 feet. So there's lots of examples of partial and full dam removals, and there's only one example I know of that I would consider a dam replacement with the rock ramp in Chesaning, where that was they maintained more or less the pond level, and then they stepped the grade down over a series of steps that the fish could pass. That was not grant funded. I don't think there was any grant funding over that project.
Yeah, they saved for it.
No, front of the full removal. Yeah, that was replaced with a ripple. They lowered it by 9 feet or something. That's done. Yeah, try it down.
I think this is good.
Yeah,
We're gonna push over now. Yeah.
So like this over here, you get is an issue over here with bacon. What is preferred, a natural bacon?